All right. So today we have Jennifer Tracy joining us with the power of our story. Just to give you a little bit of insight, since 2009, Jennifer Tracy has shared her message of hope and forgiveness with countless thousands through her speaking endeavors, transformational coaching, and books. She is the co-founder of Redefine Your Mission and the Master Guide to Mental Wellness with Doc Shauna Springer. Their mission is grounded in service to those who sacrifice so much to protect us. It is a sacred mission and calling, not a job. And I can tell you personally, I love Jennifer. I love Doc Springer. I love what they bring. I have not known people personally or read anything out there that I feel like really hits the core, like these two powerful women. They have some wonderful resources that I really hope people will look into. And I'm so grateful to have you here today. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here. And I'll hand it over to you. Welcome.
Hi, guys. Yeah. So this is my first time, just so you know. I'm going to share something up on the screen here. So would you guys let me know whether or not you can see this? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and see if you can. It says host disabled attending screen sharing.
Okay, I think you should, you should be okay.
Let's see. Okay. So can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So where I'm going to hang with you guys today, this is called the ACA model of self-mastery. So no matter what it is that we're really trying to master, so today I'm going to be talking about forgiveness, right? Where I'm going to hang with you guys today is really in this first circle of awareness and talk about some of the misconceptions about forgiveness, what it is, what it's not, things like that. I'm going to hit on a few things that move into that second circle that are, what are our options when we're faced with these types of things? And so often when we're in the thick of it, we only see one or two things, but when you get into it and you find a guide or a teacher or a coach or a therapist or a doc or a friend or a spouse, they can help you actually see that there's more than one or two choices that we so often only see when we're sometimes in the thick of things, right? But even still, if you guys hear with me, what good is awareness? What good is suicide awareness? What good is it if we say to someone, look, here's a list of all these options and resources, if we can't actually get people to move into this third section, which is to take action? And so the Master Guide to Mental Wellness is designed to help people find awareness on their own, analyze what choices they have, and then to empower them to take action in that area. So there's over 40 modules in there. And again, I'm coming out of the gate pretty strong on this because we have packaged this up in such a way that, just as Doc Springer was talking about when it comes to shame and firearm safety and all those kind of things that she unpacked in her hour, you find those same types of things inside there, but you find it in a safe, confidential place where you're able to move through this module. So I kind of wanted you to have like this vision here as we go forward of like, we're hanging out today in forgiveness in this awareness section, okay? So does that make sense to you guys? All right, so how do I stop sharing here? Okay, I'm back. Okay, so when it comes to forgiveness, one of the first things I like to bring awareness to is this. Would you guys all with me take your finger and just look at your thumb, right? And you look at how unique our thumbprints are, right? They're so unique to the point that they could literally trace me or you all the way from Africa to Canada, right? Like that's how unique our thumbprints are. And so as we go into this topic on forgiveness, I want you to hold that space in there that everyone enters into this topic of forgiveness so very differently. And so the things that I present may feel different for you. What you were taught about forgiveness may be entirely different than what I was taught. What I want to share with you guys today is the way that I had to personally navigate through, first of all, forgiving myself for being a mother who ended up in the psychiatric unit. Second of all, being the mother who chose not to go that day to get family errands. And that decision that I made not to go get family errands with my husband and daughters, it took us 10 minutes. And 10 minutes later, my husband and daughter were killed. Now, I'm a math person and I'm pretty logical, you guys. So my mind adds up. What if I had just gone that day? What if I had gotten in the front seat? We were driving down that road. Time tells me we would have already been through that intersection where Mr. Goonan blew through his stop sign, right? Are y'all with me on that? So talk about survivor's guilt, okay? I wasn't in the car that I was supposed to be that day, all right? Then you have a man who's drunk and kills your loved ones. So now enter forgiveness for the third time into my life, right? Then I have a mother-in-law who uses the fact that I was in the psychiatric unit to go into a system and say, because you were struggling with thoughts of suicide, because you were struggling, you're an unfit mom, and I want your children. So 4 levels of forgiveness, right? This is like all the way back to 2004, 2005, guys. Okay. So what I'm going to unpack with you is just like the skim of stuff today. And that's what I told Sarah is like, there is so much that I could unpack on this for you guys today. But I want to give you something today to walk away with. And what it is these first 3 concepts of what is the real working definition, a real working definition of forgiveness. Let's level the playing field so that we can all come back to this same working definition and use it over and over. So for those of you that were on the call with Doc Springer, she said the word grief, right? But how many of us actually know the 5 stages of grief? So if you think about those 5 stages, it's denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. Now, here's the thing. When I was in the psychiatric unit, my first battle of learning how to forgive myself, I realized in the psychiatric unit that if I could not figure out how to love me and forgive myself for my shortcomings, there's no way I would ever make it on the outside of that psychiatric unit. So on the inside of that psychiatric unit, it really prepared me, you guys, for the day when Brian and Brittany were killed and a drunk driver, not intentionally, he did not wake up that morning and say, I want to intentionally kill Jennifer's loved ones. I want to intentionally kill 2 people today. Now, hear me. The choice that he made that day to drive drunk has obviously profoundly affected me, but he didn't get in that car with intention, right? To do that. And you'll hear more about that as we unpack how he reacted to what he did and how that really plays into forgiveness, okay? So as we go into this forgiveness, don't forget your thumbs about how different they are. And to really point to that, think about this for just 1 second, if you will. When is the first time that you heard the word forgiveness? How old were you? Who taught it to you? When they taught it to you, did they display it? Or was it hypocritical? What are your beliefs around this word forgiveness? Did you grow up in a home where people said, forgiveness is for sissies? Did you grow up in a home where there were comments made about forgiveness? Because do you see how we all bring those types of beliefs around forgiveness to this table that we're about to dig on and create this working definition, right? So for myself, I grew up in a Christian home. And the first time I heard the word forgive was, forgive us our daily debts as we forgive those who trespass against us. You guys, for me, it was a word. It was a word I heard, but in my own home, it was not displayed. There was abuse and friction and addiction and all kinds of stuff on my home front, right? So it was a word that I was taught, but no one showed me how to properly do it, right? Okay, so I got my little cheat sheet. So when did you first learn about it? Because that makes such a difference. For me, where I learned about it was from this faith-based place, right? Okay, so I want to help you guys be really clear. After Brian and Brittany were killed, I went searching. I went searching for where do I find the how? Because I had this Jesus man, this Jesus God, this Jesus, right? Who said I should forgive. But I'm sitting in a pile of shit, literally, where my loved ones were killed. And I'm sitting there going, how? I hear you. I hear you, but how? Right? Even still today, when I open up the Bible, I cannot find the actual how in there. Did you know that? I don't really see it's so by the way, this is how you actually do it. We hear the word forgiveness, but guess what? He not only spoke of it, he displayed it. And one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to faith in Jesus is you don't even have to believe that he's your savior. This is not about one of those kind of sessions, okay? What I'm bringing to this table is he's someone who's historical. And even if you want to look at what he did, he still displayed forgiveness. On the night before he was betrayed, right? He knew who he was going to be betrayed by. And yet he still washed the feet of the man who would betray him. So we're talking about someone who's talking about forgiveness and also lived it out, right? And so if there was anyone that I wanted to try to model, it would be him, only because I'm okay, he did it, but how? I couldn't find my answers anywhere. And so I went searching. And lo and behold, I end up at Webster's dictionary. If you pull up Webster's dictionary under forgiving, what it says is that you cease to hold anger or resentment towards an offender. So think about this. I have a drunk driver who kills my loved ones. And just according to Webster's dictionary, that means that I'm supposed to what? I'm supposed to stop holding the pain or the anger towards who? Him. And this is the game-changing point. Does it say that I will stop feeling angry? It doesn't. In fact, when I went searching and really, really started unpacking, I discovered that the same Jesus who talked about forgiveness actually says in the New Testament, in your anger, don't sin. What? You mean while I'm angry, don't miss the mark? What? What does that mean? So I want to help you in a logical way understand my thought process. I had to make the choice, not an emotion. Forgiveness is not an emotion. Forgiveness is a choice. I had to make the choice to say, I'm going to stop holding pain and anger towards Mr. Goonan. But what I was left with was still a lot of pain and anger. Would you guys agree with me? I was, right? And so if you remove those people who are out there doing these things, right? And you bring the focus back to what's actually the pain and the anger, and you come so focused on it, and you ask yourself, how do I honor this pain and this anger? What it actually does is it empowers you. Now, I have had so many people when I'm talking with them say, I'll go get Mr. Goonan right now, Jennifer. I'll bring him right in here and I'll shred him and I'll beat him and I'll torture him, right? Because that's what he deserves. And my question to them is, if you do that, will it ever bring me back? Ever here in this physical realm, will it ever give me back what I want? It won't, will it? And so here's where it gets complex, right? We're talking about Jennifer's world. We're talking about firefighters showing up on a crash scene, digging through rubbish to save the 2 lives that were saved that day. We're talking about a first officer on scene who I've spoken with now for so many years, who was the first one there all by himself until the other helpers arrived. We're talking Flight for Life, EMTs, nurses, right? All of them who see these things over and over again. And you guys are trained. You are trained to compartmentalize that. Through forgiveness, I have removed the emotion part of it. And on a logical level, I learned to say that no amount of anger, hatred, punishment towards Mr. Goonan would ever really give me back what I wanted. And because of that, I could shift my focus onto what I could actually do with it. So here's where the game changes. This plays out so very differently in our intimate relationships. This plays out differently when it comes to justice. By no means am I saying because I forgave Mr. Goonan, am I saying what he did was okay. By no means am I not thankful for the very ground that I'm on and the men and women who have fought for my freedom to bring me here today, who are willing to do things that I'm actually not willing to stand up and do. Not if it called, I would, but that's not my calling. So with forgiveness, do you see how it's more of a concentrated energy of what you are going to do with the pain and anger? And if you guys heard me talk about the 5 stages of grief, anger is one of them. So if we pull back today and we actually think about a lot of the things that we're facing right now, what I'm actually doing is I'm giving you permission to be angry. But I'm saying in your anger, go do something profoundly powerful with that. That's what I'm saying. My oldest daughter was left permanently injured, deaf, and her right eye does not close. She has a gold weight in her eye that helps her eye close. And if you don't think for the last 17 years that when I look at her, I don't see her twin sister who's gone, and I don't see the effect of what that man did to her, that I don't still feel pain and anger, then you don't know me at all. I profoundly, with fierce devotion, take that pain and return it to an area where I can be used with power and purpose. Because on that corner where they used to be, and it was just devastation, I had to partner with God and say, how can I use this shit to grow some amazing flowers? And that is the choice that all of us have to ask ourselves every single day. Because the final stages of grief is acceptance. Now, we have a Mr. Goonan who walks into court and he accepts the 24-year sentence that he was sentenced. He weeps the entire time. He asks me for forgiveness. And at the very same time, I have a mother-in-law rubbing the fact that I had been in the psychiatric unit in my face, fighting me in the court system for my children. So, what does intention and remorse, what part do those two words right there play in forgiveness? It's huge. That's what I unpack in the second module, right? Today, I wanted to bring for you guys a working definition, something that is simple, that you can come back to over and over again, which is to forgive means that you stop holding pain or anger towards the offender. And guess what? Sometimes, guess who the offender is? Me. Right? I had to learn how to add myself into that equation. It took me 9 years, you guys, to forgive Brian's mom for what she did. I fought for 8 months in a very unfair system. 8 months. This was after Brian and Brittany were killed, to get my girls. I was forced to go through psychological training. It came out that I had post-traumatic stress disorder. The therapists were like, what in the world is going on? I said, this is small town politics. This is mother-in-law, Mama Bear coming out. She's mad at me, right? Like all of that. But what part does intention and remorse play into forgiveness? So one time I'm up speaking on a stage, and at the end of speaking, I always open it up for Q&A. And this gentleman looks at me at the very end and he says to me, I have a question for you. He's like, do you think that you would have been able to forgive that man as easily as you did, Jennifer, if he had never served any time? If he had never been caught? If he didn't show remorse? And I said, oh, you're onto something here, right? But here's how you still find your center in this. Absolutely. If that man had escaped, right, hit and run, you think that I would not have sought after justice? Oh, hell yeah, I would have, right? Like, it doesn't change that. But when you seek justice, you do it because it's the right thing to do. You don't do it because when you get justice, it's going to help you out of the 5 stages of grief. You don't do it because you think all of a sudden you're going to sit with your legs crossed and you're going to meditate and be in this like lovely state. Because the minute that he was sentenced, even if they gave him a life sentence, even if you, Scott, were willing to go get him right now and defend me, right? It will never give me back what I want, right? And so if we think that, like, it's almost like people are stuck in this like place of thinking like what they want is over there, and when they get it, then they're going to be happy. And that's where I have to come in and challenge that thought and say, think about that. Think about 17 years later for me to be happy, thriving, better than I was back then with the PTSD. That means that I've had to learn how to forgive myself, you guys, over and over as I struggled with post-traumatic stress symptoms, as I let my girls down, as I struggled on the home front, all of the things. It was so messy back then. If I didn't learn how to forgive myself, right? How could I have ever done that, right? So can I stop it for a second and just get a little bit of interaction with you guys? Because I've got 2 more things that I want to really unpack and teach. But just real quickly, what are you guys' thoughts on the 5 stages of grief, right? How anger is one of them. Acceptance is another, and yet I dip my toes in anger all the time, right? I come back out freaking angry as all hell, but I come back out and I go do something powerful with it, right? So that working definition of forgiveness really is empowering. What do you guys think of that? Have you guys heard of it really taught that way?
I think the most powerful thing that I've gotten out of this is that you have as much power as anything, and it's that word choice, because each one of those levels requires a specific choice made by you in a time that you're ready to do it.
Yes.
And it may be a process, but it's not just a process. It just kind of happens. You have to very much make that choice to dive into that. And that's the power that I think that you're talking about.
It is. And it's empowering. Do you see how, like, when I once kind of dipped into it, I was like, I learned how to apply it to myself.
Absolutely.
Right? Anybody else have anything on just like kind of the like Webster's dictionary, right? Like, I'm trying to pull out emotion. Obviously, I'm teaching you through my story because it's lived, right? It's like how I had to figure this out. But I apply a very logical sense to forgiveness, which is like, we have to remove the emotion part of it and logically say, are we talking about justice here? Are there things that need to be taken care of? Or are we talking about someone who had remorse and didn't have the intention? Because to me, moving through those 2 things are very, very different, right? But even still, at the end of moving through it is still my own pile of shit that I'm left with. Like, that's the truth for me, right? Anybody else have anything else you want to throw out before I kind of jump into this piece here?
Yeah, I've got 2 things, if I may. The part about choice is absolutely right. It is a choice in how you react, and the emotions are not tools of cognition. I'm sure a lot of folks have heard that, and it's so true. But it doesn't mean that we live a perfect life, that after we've come to terms and have accepted what it means to forgive, just like you're talking about here, it doesn't mean that we might not go back into our human condition of grief or anger. We're gonna have these things. It's gonna come back and forth. And then the second thing I wanted to say is, there's only one person that could have handled this the textbook way, I guess, if you're going to call it that. And you've already talked about him. And giving yourself grace for what you went through. And I mean, I couldn't imagine the things that you personally went through, and the fact that you're turning around now and you're being a shepherd to people is incredible, and you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you. So my first responders and my veterans, here's where I really see, you kind of talked about this, Chris, but here's where I really see like things start to like separate, right? And here's the struggle. So there's two things that I've got for you guys here to kind of unpack with you. When it's an us versus them mentality, which is something that you guys have to have in order to survive, there is no doubt that when you show up on scene, when you're out as a unit or a team, you absolutely have to feel like an us versus them, right? Here's the problem with that though. This coin was given to me by a United States Marine who was drunk driving and was mandated to sit in an hour-long presentation with me. So what happens when our good-hearted men and women are struggling with the things that they see, don't know how to forgive themselves, don't know how to turn it around, don't know where to go, don't know where the safe place is to really check in with what's going on, like Doc Springer was talking about, that safe place, right? What happens when our good-hearted men and women, when it's us versus them, when they find themselves on the other side of honor? Now what? And so that's the variable to the equation, right? That's the variable, because this man expected to come into a room and hear me as an angry victim about to raise my hand and make him feel bad. But instead, I just taught him what I just shared with you about forgiveness. And I beckoned him to go home and look at himself in the mirror and with fierce devotion for the rest of his life, commit to working on being a better him each day, and to forgive himself for the things that he had done that had brought him to that point. And when he handed me that coin, he had tears in his eyes. And so that is what makes it so tough, because now we're back to intention, remorse. And do you guys see that when it's black and white, when it's law and it's us versus them, we're not able to apply those principles, right? We're not able to apply the law of intention and the law of remorse when you show up on a crash scene. You're not. When you show up on a scene and someone's got a gun pointed at you, you're not thinking about then, well, what's this person's intention? And maybe I should sit there and talk to him and figure out what's really going on in his life. You're doing what you are there to do, which is to protect lives, to protect those around you, to protect those that you love and serve, right? So do you see how it's like, I'm asking you to do something so foreign. I'm asking you to hold two very different opposing thoughts and emotions and options. Well, guess what? Welcome to my world. Welcome to the left hand holding so powerfully the grief of a little 9-year-old girl that I haven't seen in 17 years. And so powerfully moving forward with these lessons and teaching and sharing this message of hope and forgiveness, right? Welcome to my world of holding them both so powerfully. And so for anyone who thinks it's not possible, it's possible. It takes strategy. It takes skill. It takes someone who wants it, who wants to go there, who wants that freedom. And so I always tell Sarah, I was like, my ideal clients are high functioning. They know that they're stuck somewhere. They're stuck on that relationship home front. They are in a season of transition. They know if they reach out wherever they work through their EAP, that they have a risk of losing their job. But they are trying to fix whatever it is that they're facing. And so you bring that to me, completely analytical. I can see the whole thing. And then I'm able to come back in and say, I see it. Let's go here. Right? So do you guys see the difference between how the us versus them plays out? How tough that is in the heat of the moment, how it goes against the very core of what you're trained to do. And yet on a personal level and on the home front, in our relationships with people that we love, how we have to apply these principles, right? And they seem to oppose each other. Do you guys agree with me? They seem to oppose each other, right? It's like, wait, how do I go out into this world and do this thing that's asked of me, and yet at the same time, come back on the home front and be kind and gracious to myself? You may have to communicate with the person that I just messed up with and say, hey, I just really lost it because I had a trigger of my PTSD. Will you forgive me? Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that it requires courage and strategies of knowing how to put that together on the home front versus when you're out there, right? And it's just knowing how to do both. And that's why, again, Doc Springer and I have put together the master guide so that you could go through it, go through that first section of awareness, and you grab the key insights that you need. And then it's designed to show you what the options are. And then I'm in there firing you up and saying, here's how you put this into action. Here's how you put this strategy into place. So this is not just a bunch of key insights. This is a full circle type of program that we've put together for you so that at the end of it, you can literally say, wow, thank you, Doc Springer, for that exercise on how to talk to a therapist or a coach and build trust with them. Like, there are so many different modules that we've put inside there for you guys, okay? So I just want to share with you guys, today I really talked with you through some of the second part of the forgiveness, but I've got 3 other parts. So, and excuse me, I have to have something to drink. Okay. So, this is probably one of the harder parts for me to share with you guys, but when I unpack it, is section 4 is, what do you do if you feel like you're the one that's broken? You're the broken car on the home front with the post-traumatic stress, and you feel like you're a burden to your family. And this is some of the tough stuff that we're navigating today with suicide, okay? Is sometimes people will say messages and say things like, you know, be strong, reach out for help. And we all know what can happen if you reach out for help to the wrong person, right? We all know the repercussions that can come with that. So all the way into my story, really trying to turn my life around. And boom, 2012, I have brain surgery. Chiari-1, decompression, titanium plate, 19 staples the back of my head. I come home, my youngest daughter at the time has to bathe me. My neighbors have to take me to the grocery store and to physical therapy. The 3 years following, this is the part of the story that people really don't know and I don't really put out there a lot. But 3 years after my brain surgery, I really kicked it in with Call for Backup. And that beginning of that year, I had 18 speaking engagements. I created workbooks that I would take in. And I had 18 speaking engagements. My book was set to come out that year. This is 2017. And what people don't know is that because of everything that was happening on the home front, because of the pressure of 18 speaking engagements, which, by the way, getting paid for a speaking engagement comes with a lot of stress. Like people dream of like, oh, I would love to get paid. But when you put a like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 price tag on a speaking engagement, there's a lot of pressure to be good, to show up, to do a great job, right? I mean, people don't think about the flip side of that. I was under so much pressure, you guys, that year that I started really struggling with thoughts of suicide again. And I've had thoughts of suicide on and off since Brian and Brittany were killed, but it was like a fleeting thought. It was more like, even when I had my brain surgery itself, I was in a lot of pain. This was not the same, you guys. I was on the verge of suicidal ideation again, and I had already been there. And so it was in that moment that I realized how incredibly tough it is when you're looked on as a leader. How incredibly tough it would have been for me in that moment to display to everyone in 2017 that in the midst of putting out a book called Inside the Mind of Suicide, all the things that I had overcome, how awful that would have been for someone to find out that I was actually on the verge of suicidal ideation again. And so in my book, in my first book, I did what is true Jennifer fashion. And I had a good talk to myself, look at myself in the mirror, and I'm like, Jennifer, you talk to people every single day about this. What is it that you would tell them to do? What is it that you would tell someone who's in this situation to do? And so I made that list. And then I went out and I did that. And one of the things on that list was I had to walk away from finishing my book for 4 months. Not easy. Went to the doctor, made sure everything was okay physically, got back in to see my therapist. You guys, within 2 months, the suicidal ideation for me lifted. And that is why you see me today continue to show up so powerfully, because I've not just battled it once. I've not just had to learn how to forgive myself here. I've not had to learn how to forgive someone else who didn't intend or someone who did intend. But it was during that time period that part of the suicidal ideation, the 2017, was that I truly felt like I had let my girls down. And if there was one thing that would take me out, it would be that I feel like I had failed my children. And that's when I realized how hard it is as a leader to A, go get help, and B, to forgive yourself. And I'm sitting there thinking about this, you guys. Think about this. I hadn't beat my children. I didn't lock them in a closet and make them eat cat poop. Like, I failed them because, I was angry or short-tempered, or I wasn't at all their events. All of the things, the pressures that we put on ourselves, right? Now, can you imagine people who are struggling with even more severe symptoms? People who have found themselves on the other side of honor, good-hearted men and women who have found themselves on the other side of honor, right? And I'm thinking, if this is how hard it is for me to forgive myself for just not being a good mom, the one thing that would break me to my core, right? How much harder is it to forgive ourselves when we have actually failed or found ourselves on the other side of honor? And again, those are some of the things that Doc Springer speaks into when she talks about moral injury inside the Master Guide, right? Those are some of the things that she shows up so powerfully inside Therefore and does. So I'm going to bring you guys back in again. This is the first time that I've ever delivered this content in this type of way, Sarah. I'm used to it being live on a stage. People are working through worksheets. I do this with my coaching clients, that kind of stuff. You know, I was willing to come on here today because forgiveness is such a tough thing. And I hope that anyone who at least listens to this today can at least walk away with a working definition, which is that you stop holding the pain and anger towards the offender, and sometimes the offender is you. Through the rest of my sections in the forgiveness game plan is where I take you through more ways of how to do that. Today, like I said, I was hanging out a lot around in the awareness section, right? Bringing awareness to some of these things that, that I feel are not out there. You guys have any thoughts for me?
Oh, Jennifer, it's always so powerful. I think too, just to give people a little bit of space, I think it takes a minute to actually absorb all this. So I'm filling a little space in right now, unless somebody is ready.
Yeah, it's, believe me, I get it. You know,
so powerful.
I'm 17 years on this side, right? And learning to hold this space so powerfully, you know, it's taken me time. But again, you know, it's just learning that you have to come back to the choice. It's not an emotion, right? Doesn't excuse wrong behavior. In close relationships, it looks different. You know, those are all of the other things that I unpack in the rest of the sections.
There is, you know, the reason why this all came up is because we had some first responders that answered that call on 9/11, and how tough it was even 20 years later. Like, how do you be free of the anger? You know, the feeling of how could I ever forgive the people that did that? Mm-hmm. And just the consequences that really come with not being able to let it go. Right. So I think you really speak powerfully to that.
And that, again, on a simple answer is you don't let it go if you don't want to. You take the pain, the anger, and the rage, and you go do something powerful with it. And that's the difference. And I feel like as somebody who used to be very active inside of a 4-square wall type building, church, God, faith place, no one was giving me permission to be angry. In fact, I felt shame and guilt if I showed up in that place. You know, it was like I was supposed to be sitting with my legs crossed, and it's like, well, you need to just forgive. And it's like, no, like that kind of statement doesn't just work. And so, you know, there's more that I've studied that I unpacked. Like I went back to the Hebrew and really looked up the word evil, wicked, sin. Like there's so much that I packed into like getting to where I am. So, but yeah, right. It's like, I'm not, to anyone who's feeling that anger, like that's the part where you have to ask yourself, am I letting this anger control me? Or do I want to be in control of even my own anger? And that's what you've seen me do, is harness that pain and that anger. And it's so empowering, you guys. Like that's the power point. That's the power stance of saying, not even that, you know? And again, I'm sorry, but it took me a lot longer to forgive my mother-in-law than it did Mr. Goonan. And of course, he accepted his plea, you know? And so I do understand what it's like when people are not sorry. And we're talking about different things here too, guys. I get it, okay? A drunk driver is not the same as a Taliban. I get it, right? So I'm not trying to compare. I'm not trying to compare my pain or forgiveness to a global, you know, issue.
Yeah, Jennifer, I absolutely understand and agree with that. And there's a patience that's involved with this too, patience with yourself. You know, forgiveness takes patience because it takes time. And not everyone's going to process this along that same timeline. And we're going to have these struggles, and we're going to go back. I kind of mentioned that last time I was, commenting here. I always try to tell people with patience or with forgiveness, there's two things. It's not just forgiveness, but there's the patience involved in that process. And if you're not patient with yourself, you're not going to get there. And watching you talk, I'm watching your eyes, and you're looking at everybody when you're talking. You're so attentive in your message here. And this is a very powerful message. And this applies to everybody because it's life. And whether it's on the battlefield or whether it's on the streets at home, we all have those very similar emotions and feelings. And what you're talking to of how to process this and how to get your life back on track after you've lost everything. I think I'm getting a lot out of it. This is tremendous. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I also want to point out that a lot of people haven't even been taught how to forgive themselves or forgive, period. Like, we don't even know what forgiveness looks like. We can say the word over and over again, I forgive you, but what does that mentally comprehend? What does that look like? And I think as individuals, and some of you guys know me, I'm a woman of great faith. And I say this often, even Jesus wept, because he wept and he had to look at the overall bigger picture of what he was going through. And me personally, forgiveness is such a huge word. And it takes so much willpower to say to somebody, I forgive you. And it will never, ever, ever be the same because I've had some of the utmost betrayal in my life. And to look, and it was from family. So to look family in the eye and say, I forgive you, that's a lie. That's a lie that I am telling myself, because I never acknowledged to say, hey, I truly do forgive you. Because none of us have ever been taught, hey, how to forgive. What steps does forgiveness actually look like? So that's just so profound that you're talking about this, because my gosh.
Well, and so does it help to see that you could have a range of emotions that still circle around the safe boundaries, that still circle around the betrayal, that still circles around anger, right? You can still be in your own grief, and yet choosing to forgive just says no amount of like suffrage on their part is ever going to give me back what I want. And so you just choose to release them from it. That's it. I mean, you just clean that. That's it. And then it brings your steady focus back to you and the pain that you're facing. And it allows you to really clearly with clarity, focus on who you are, what you can do with it. And the moment that you take that pain and you go do something with it, even if it's just a random act of kindness that day, which you do so powerfully, like, I think you probably are doing it more than you realize, but as far as forgiving, does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense. Just forgiveness is a very hard word. Very, very hard word, because with forgiveness, there's pain. And with pain, there's anger. So you're reliving it over and over again. So with you being 17 years in a journey where somebody is just starting to say, oh my gosh, I haven't dealt with any of this crap in my whole life, that forgiveness just seems like a word on a piece of paper that just exists. So how do you go from, all right, I'm ready to say forgive you for what you've done, but how do you like mentally put that into your own, like, how do you put that in your like day-to-day life? Right? Say the person like that, I'm just going to use this as an example. Somebody well, we'll just say molestation. I forgive you. I can forgive you over and over again. But that's my reality that I have to live with the rest of my life. So how do you, the person dead and gone doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
But it's the lasting trauma that you have to go through for the rest of your life. But you still keep telling yourself, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. But the pain is still there. So it's like you're reliving it over and over again. And it's just hard to move past it.
Yeah, I think that that's really like, I love what you're saying. If I'm hearing you, right, is two things. First of all, someone fresh into grief, right? Someone first year, 3 months into something that's traumatically happened to them. This type of teaching, this type of moving through the ACA and harnessing your power and all of that, you're totally right. This is not the time. They're still in the stages of grief, right? But let's say someone has processed, they're 7 years out, they're 5 years out from a trauma that they've gone through, and yet they still feel like it just happened 3 months ago. There's two things that are really happening there. Is like you're still stuck in the stages of grief then, because when you get to acceptance, you look at the trauma and you look at what you've been through as an outside bystander. You can still experience the pain. You can still experience all of the other things, but like you've accepted it. And then I choose to, with the pain and the anger, move forward and do something powerful with it. So there's like a 2-step process of like, I have accepted this. And then I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z. But the second thing I heard you say, which I love, and this is again, like what I unpack in the forgiveness, right? In the other sections is, what does this really tangibly look like on the home front?
Right.
Right. Because that's the difference. And what you're really asking, whether you realize it or not, though, is boundaries, communication, what's okay, what's not, right? Like, and I'm sure for anyone who's dealt with family who's abusive, or, you know, there was anything like that on even within your own relationships, is it okay to create safe boundaries? And then you get backlash from the rest of the family because you do that, right? Like there's so much that's packed around that. Like, what does that really look like on the home front? And I get that. And again, today, like there's just no way for me to teach that. But teaching you how to do that is exactly what I do in the rest of the modules. And I'm not talking a module like you listen to on your own. I'm saying that's the work that I do with people, because this brings this up, right? The awareness. Remember how I said we're like hanging out in that awareness? This brings up this awareness of like the need for it, or I'm stuck here. And so that's what I do as a coach, is say, okay, this is your particular thing. Here's how you can, you know, confront this. Here's how you can powerfully move forward on this. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so, you know, that's the difference for me, is when we sit like this. That's why I asked with the thumbprint. It's like we all come to it so differently, you guys. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are Jewish. I have some friends that are atheist. And so, you know, what they believe about God, where they even were taught about God or forgiveness or anything like that, comes from a very different perspective. And so I can roll with that, because I can still come back to the Webster's Dictionary, which basically says, like, I still have to figure out what I'm going to do with the pain and the anger. If I stop holding it towards you, it's not actually like, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think people think that if they hold on to this anger because they're so mad at this other person, that like if they free the other person, that somehow like it doesn't validate the pain that you feel, or somehow like now that other person isn't on the hook. But really what you're doing is you're taking your power back. You're really taking your power back and saying, no, that pain still definitely exists, but I'm going to do something with it. And so
I think maybe like how you just explained that is so perfect. I think the other person not validating, like they did something wrong and you still have to be the bigger person to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
for you to be free, and then them just go on with their life like it didn't exist.
Oh,
I
and
think that's
yeah.
where like a lot of like the resentment and the anger stays with somebody.
Well,
like,
and that's my mother-in-law, right? I mean,
right.
you guys, I didn't get to tell you, but like, she got the life insurance money. Like, we were left with no house, no car, no life insurance money. And she took the money and left. She moved to a different state. And I'm not ashamed to tell you guys that, because like, you think I didn't have a level of betrayal from within my own family.
Right.
You know, but I think part of what I'm hearing too is like, I had to learn how to compartmentalize that for the safety of my own life. I had to wrap her up and put her somewhere and say, I consider her to be an evil person because who does that to their grandchildren? Like, I'm like, you know what? If you don't like me, that's fine. But she should have taken that money, put it in a fund for her, you know, for her grandchildren, and set them up so that when they needed a car and when they needed whatever, I mean, seriously, if you don't like me, fine, right? But for her to do what she did, it took me so much longer, Tanya, to forgive her. It took me 9 years. But at that 9-year mark, that's where I really started digging into the forgiveness. That's when I created the forgiveness game plan and really started unpacking, how do I do this? Mm-hmm. And it was partly because I started failing as well as a person. And I was like, shoot, like right. Now I'm part of this equation. And so I have to figure this out. And so that's partly why I started really digging deep into the how. So we are at our hour, but what I want to do is just kind of let you guys know, are you still with us, Mike?
Mike is here. Yeah.
Are you still with us?
I am.
Oh my gosh, you've been so quiet this whole time.
Oh, good. I've been taking a lot of things in.
So a little behind the scenes with Mike, you guys. We've got some fun things that we're moving forward with. We are going to open up with a very small group of people, a beta coaching program. And what we would like to do is find about 15 or 18 people. There will be no cost for this. We would absolutely love it if you would purchase the Master Guide to Mental Wellness, because we're going to help you navigate through those things. Okay. But we are looking for 15 to 18 people who would like to continue this journey of what we were talking about today and kind of unpacking it for yourself, whatever came up for you. Mike and I have worked behind the scenes for about 3 years on this coaching part of it, of how together we could come in and hold some of our veterans, our first responders, our firefighters, our police officers right now. And so this is the first time that we're really going out together, doing this as a group. I've done all of my work in like behind the scenes one-to-one. So I wanted to kind of give you just a few minutes, Mike, and just talk about the last part of this forgiveness is a strategy that I teach, and I've taught it to him. And so if you could just kind of speak into how powerful that was for you, the strategy.
Yeah, I think, to start with is, first responders, we train on strategies and tactics for every situation that we're called to when we're on the job. But when we leave work and go home, we have to develop a new set of strategies and tactics. Yeah, we can take some of the principles of those other ones, but it's truly implementing a new set of strategies and tactics. And having initially a working definition of forgiveness helps be able to filter, as you said, the anger, grief, and pain, mm-hmm. which then allows us to build and grow through some additional strategies. And Jennifer, I appreciate, and it's truly an honor to work alongside you and help lead and guide others through this journey and take a deeper dive into what this looks like.
Yeah, so that's just a soft welcome, Michael. I kind of already told you a little bit about that like, You know, we really are. We want to work through kind of this next stage of what would that look like for us to hold some people in a group setting who want to help navigate some of these next steps. And I think it's funny because for those of you that heard Doc Springer, like, I would much rather right now, this is where I'm really channeling my energy, is into the coaching and the group coaching and the Master Guide to Mental Wellness. And she's like, sign me up for speaking. And I'm like, I really don't want to be traveling in an airplane right now and speaking. So it's just a nice fit. I hope that that comes through, you know, very well, that, you know, she's looking more for the speaking and I'm looking to build more of the close connections and help people walk through it.
And I think, you know, thanks to Sarah for, you know, creating groups like this, the safe space. And, you know, I think by, you know, Jennifer and I teaming up to create another safe space where we can touch more people and continue to grow the learnings and the teachings that we're talking about is important, especially in today's world.
I think that is the whole point. I think, you know, just the collaboration. I think that's why I love Jennifer and Doc Springer, because there's such a synergy of what all of us can bring. And that's the point, is to bring community, camaraderie here, to have a tribe of safety. And then the way Jennifer can break things down is just remarkable. It definitely helps navigate the way out of trauma. And, you know, what Doc Springer brings, just her insight in the way that she can articulate things and just changing narratives that are so destructive and turning them around into a way that brings healing is so powerful. So I just feel absolutely honored to not only have you share, Jennifer, but just to, I just totally consider you a friend and great collaborator. So thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything? I know somebody has written a lot in the chat section.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, where do boundaries come in?
That was me. I know you've tried to touch on some of them and you don't have enough time to go through all of them. I actually was sending you a private thing.
Okay.
And also some, like, what I put in there is coming from multiple different places. It's like not just one source. So that's been very overwhelming, being unemployed.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Betty.
You didn't do it.
No, I know, but this is a sacred spot right here.
Well, and I know there's somebody in here that used to work for the VA, but the VA has been a perpetrator.
Yeah.
And people aren't believing me.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, again, you have to come back to that center, you guys, of the black and the white, the us versus them. And you just have to get that out and you have to sit where you are, right? Because if I was stuck in black and white thinking, do you see how I would have never been able to find my way into the center?
I understand that, but with my situation, I actually did go to them and I gave them grace and I actually told them where they probably were having problems, but people's pride and just vengeance, like hatefulness, they've accessed my records and intentionally re-traumatized me. And there's no doubt in my mind, it can't be coincidence.
Right.
And I feel like it's happened more than once with them. And that's what is even more, because I would have set my boundaries and I would have given them feedback, but I need to be a part of my healing and I get to determine what works for me. And I need my self-agency, especially being a rape victim from military sexual trauma.
Yeah. And so again, like, this is just one of those things where I'm saying today, when I started out with my 3 circles, right? Like I knew that I was going to be hanging a lot around in that awareness. I knew that I was going to be bringing up these things. And as you move through those 3 circles, that's really my calling, is to help you discover that maybe there are more choices than you realized. And I hope I presented some of those today for you guys, right? That there were more choices than you realized.
I'm still trying to find the choices.
And, you know, again, so like that might be something like we would love to welcome you into the beta coaching. Like, you know, we'd love to help you unpack that. So, because yeah, like that's just, you know, it's not possible for me to do that in an hour session. I mean, Mike and I have worked, you know, 3 months just on me really teaching him the strategy and then him putting it into practice and saying, yeah, this really works. And so it's, you know, like you said, Scott, right? It's implementation and having that patience. And again, you know, that's the toughest thing about what we're facing today, right? Is there are some people who are literally hanging on with just 2 fingers on the side of a wall. And you would never walk by someone, not if you're kind, loving, and really care about them, and intentionally see them hanging with 2 fingers and say, you know, be more strong or just hold on. I mean, you would reach in and try to help them. But internally, we have to develop for ourselves that fight, that advocating for ourselves, and especially that you have value and worth. And I think that that's one of the hardest things when you're battling suicidal ideation, is that you feel like you are no longer worthy, that you don't have worth. And so I hope that, you know, when you see my face, I hope that I remind you that you definitely have value, because imagine if I had believed that lie. Imagine if I had believed that lie, right? So
it is amazing, you know, just like you are modeling, Jennifer, when we can get to the point where we hold on to what you're actually talking about.
mm-hmm.
It is unlimited. Once we harness that, what did you say? Harness that pain and anger,
Mm-hmm.
Where it no longer controls us,
Mm-hmm.
what the potential is of what we can do with that. And you are a powerful example of how many lives you are saving, how many mental health issues you are relieving by you having the courage to step out, harness your anger and pain, and use it for the good.
Yeah. And you guys, when I reach rage, like if I really allow myself to reach rage, especially over something that Kathy did to my children, when like Michaela's suffering, my antidote for rage is to take a $20 bill and to get in my car, and this was pre-COVID, and to go out and find a homeless person and to park my car and to walk over and say, are you hungry? Can I buy you a meal? Which of these would you like? I'd like to go buy it. And I will go buy them a meal and bring it back and stand on the side of the road and say, tell me your name, tell me your story. How did you get here? That is my antidote for rage. Because it's the very thing that could have destroyed me, right? Like I was homeless, like Catholic Charities paid my rent for 8 months. So to be here all of these years later, when I reach rage, my antidote is to go to the very place that could have destroyed me and to bless. And it's powerful. When you harness that, you do. I'm sorry, it becomes addicting. Like I move through things, but please do not mistake me, you guys. I have a 3-strike rule. If I'm in a close relationship with someone and I've said to them, this is my boundary, these are the things I need, whatever, and that person just blows right through it, I'll say, hey, by the way, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I kind of have a 3-strike rule, like boundary wise. So, just because I'm forgiving, I mean, I can love you from a distance, but that does not mean that I just let train wrecks come into my life. And, so.
Yeah. Awesome. That is really important right there.
Right.
That boundary. Absolutely.
So
but it's fine. I can love you from afar, but to have the boundary. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's learning that balance. And again, it's so much harder, right? When it's people that you work with or things out of our control. But so Pam, let's follow up, okay? Because I'm trying to read through here. Or I mean, Betty, sorry.
Yeah,
it's okay. You don't need to address everything in there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I sort of know where you're coming from. I just know that I've lived this before. I just don't know why I don't have the memories. And if I would have known that I had that experience before, I wouldn't went back, because like you said, I'm an advocate of so many chances, and then I have to distance myself. And that's why I've distanced myself from the Veterans Administration. But I'm also unemployed. So that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
So I don't have the resources to get what I need, and they can't offer what I need anyways. And they have abused me. And I've reported it to the Veterans Administration Inspector General, as well as the White House hotline, and I get sent in circles, and they're covering it up.
And that's a tough one. I mean, you know, I'm staring at a 6-box thing over there in the corner. Not joking, guys. Like, I should have probably been an attorney. But when they took me to court to fight for my girls, like, I showed up as if I was an attorney. Like, they said I was doing inappropriate things in my sessions with my girls, my supervised visits. And so I got a 3-ring binder, and I took it in there to the lady who was the supervised lady. And I said, these are the things I plan to do with my children today. Paint their toenails, go to the park. I'm like, do any of these things look inappropriate to you that I should not be doing on this visit? And she's like, no, these all look fine. I'm like, great. At the end of our session, would you be willing to write off that I indeed did do those things today on the session? She had no clue what was going on the inside of that courtroom. So, you know, strategically, I've talked with Mike about this. It's like, when you see the enemy doing things like that, you have to learn how to get ahead of the enemy. And that is exactly what I did. I saw what was going on inside of this courtroom and these people. And so I was like, oh, well, I find that really interesting that you're saying that the things I did with my children were inappropriate because this lady that you have assigned to, like, supervise me, signed off that everything was okay. So my point is, like, use the pain and the anger that you're going through and try to get clarity on what it is that you can really do about this to get your life back. You have that power inside of you. And, you know, but you can't let all of that stuff weigh you down. You have to shed that off, and you have to get clear on what you want back, and that you want to move forward.
Very powerful. Does anybody want to ask anything else? We're about 12:20 right now. I don't want to cut anybody off, so I want to give everybody an opportunity. Any other comments or questions? Jennifer, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just have one comment. One of the problems that I have, and why I can't engage with the Veterans Administration and a few other, because it's not just one, is my body literally goes into pain. So I have to preserve my health. And no one has been able to tell me how to stop it from doing that. Because it just does it. I don't know how to explain it. It just does it on its own.
Well, you're not alone in that. I hope that you feel, you're not alone in the pain that you're bearing at this moment. You know, we're here with you. And none of us here have a magic pill to offer you as far as a fix, but I hope that you feel seen and heard here in this group today.
I do. It's physical pain. It's not emotional pain. I mean, it manifests in my body. Like, I've been dealing with a headache and stuff like that. So I have had to put off answering people to preserve my own well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have financial resources that I need to do other things. And I know that this was like the end of it. So that's another problem. And one of the court issues is in another state. So finding an attorney that's barred, but I don't have money to pay for that, and I don't even know who to go to, that's a whole other issue. And that's not even something I've shared with you guys on here.
Yeah.
But thank you. I do appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Just a quick little thing, Betty, too. I don't know if you've already been down this path, but from what I hear from everybody's stories, it seems like the vet center can be very helpful. And
I've been there.
okay. All right. Yeah, life is not easy, is it?
No.
Life is not easy.
No.
Healing is messy.
Yep.
And thank God for angels like you who help people navigate out to the light. And Jennifer, I cannot thank you enough for bringing what you have, bringing your pain to heal others. So
yeah, thanks for having me, and thank you guys again for just holding this space for me too. You know, I know it's emotionally. I know I don't think I normally cry this much. Even when Mike and I have been working behind the scenes on stuff, I don't think you've seen me cry this much, have you?
not uncommon on this conversation. So you are not alone.
So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.